Hello, everybody. Absolutely great that you can join an interview I will conduct in a few minutes with Professor Rabab el Mahdi. She is a professor at the Department of Political Science at the American University in Cairo, and that's absolutely great that she can join. By the way, she already published in one of our edited volumes on crisis, revolt, and war in the Arab world, a wonderful contribution about the situation in Egypt. Published in German, so for everybody of you who is able to read in German, it's a wonderful contribution by Rabab el Mahdi as well. So Rabab, thank you really so much for joining our conversation. My first question to you is about, do you expect any kind of significant change, significant difference of a new Biden administration compared to the one we had over the last 4 years, especially the Trump administration, and given the experiences we have with US interventions in the Arab world as well. So do you expect any kind of significant challenges in the sense of changes for the upcoming years regionally?
Absolutely. And when I say that, it's not undermining. We're not talking about a radical change because Biden is in any way, shape, or form radical. But this is not your typical oscillation between a Democratic administration and a Republican administration. With some changes that mostly would affect Americans, but in terms of foreign policy and national interests, there were always, concrete elements that guide the empire's outlook towards the world. What we're talking about this time is a particular shift from a Trumpian administration, not just a Republican, not any Republican administration. This is something that is unprecedented, that was unprecedented in US modern history. And I would like to look at the other way around. So, meaning that if this shift had not happened, we would be looking at the next 4 years of Trump administration. Systematically, as we know, the second term of any American president administration is usually when he, unfortunately, I can never say he or she, when he would, have a free reign, do whatever they were hoping to do, and not hold back because there is no fear or the element of re-election is not playing a role. So seeing the audacity of Trump having moved, the American embassy to Jerusalem, for example, or the American intervention or lack thereof in Syria, so on and so forth, his unequivocal support to the Saudi and the Egyptian rulers, I would have expected the next 4 years to be even more catastrophic. This is just pertaining to the Arab region, let alone the planet at large. Anything from, the implications for climate change, supporting Latin American dictators, and even the very right-wing factions in Europe, emboldening them as much as emboldening those factions in the US.
Rabab, do you see any opportunities for progressive forces, for protest movements in the Arab world, given the new situation of a Biden administration in the upcoming years?
Significant differences when it comes to the Palestinian issue, absolutely not. Just because we're lacking we're lacking a leadership that is pro-Palestinian within the Palestinian territory itself, and within the Arab region at large. I don't need to remind you that just a few months ago, Arab states like the Emirates pushed full force into an unprecedented peace agreement at no price, with no cost. I don't see what are the exact benefits with this kind of peace treaty and normalization, things that we even have not seen in Egypt over the past 40 years, more than 40 years, since we had our Camp David agreement. So any changes on the Palestinian front can only be initiated primarily through a Palestinian leadership, and then secondarily through an Arab incubating or supporting environment, and further down the road, an American administration that can be lobbied in such a way. But if we're lacking the main prerequisites within the Arab region and Palestine, then we should not be expecting any kind of opening. They will not be doing our homework on our behalf. That's for sure. Let alone that Biden isn't necessarily, the most pro-Palestinian of the lot.
Given the very hard conditions you are confronted with in Egypt, do you see any opportunities to reframe the overall developments on a political level, on an economic level, as well as on its regional repercussions?
I've never been as pessimistic as I am today. So not only have we seen the uprisings of 2011 and 2012, but last year we saw the uprisings in Iraq on an unprecedented scale, with unprecedented bravery. Same thing in Lebanon. Fast forward a year since those uprisings started, we see no improvement in the situation in either country. Same thing in Algeria, and even in Sudan, which was the success story, this thing that gave us hope. Yes. We see the ousting of a dictator, but then we don't see necessarily any changes within Sudan was one of the countries that, revolutionary Sudan was one of the countries that rushed to a peace agreement with the Israelis. So do social forces that are progressive, that are brave, exist in the Arab world? Absolutely. Be it even when they're not at the forefront, even when you don't see them, in places like Saudi Arabia or, Egypt, despite all the repression. Do they exist? Of course they exist. But are they capable of doing the work that needs to be done in order to bring about change and in order to formulate a viable alternative and take over, the policy spectrum in a sense? We don't see the classic forms of mobilization in Egypt the way we saw even before 2011. So you don't see the budding of social movements in terms of organized social movements, protests or mobilization, or even initiatives on any meaningful scale towards clear political causes. However, what we see and what I think is still the ramifications of those decades of mobilization are changes on the societal level. From young women taking, their own independence, whether financially living on their own and facing society, something that, 10 years ago was unprecedented. To taking this on to be on a phenomenal level, to finding again young men and women combating sexual harassment, for example, and creating enough pressure, which is something that happens throughout the past few months in summer, forcing actually the state institutions to prosecute people who have been for years protected from this charge. So we do see a level of vibrancy on the societal level, but this does not translate into any form of clear organization, whether in terms of civil society organizations, NGOs, or social movements.
Rabab, thank you really so much for joining this interview, and it was absolutely great to talk to you about an US empire in crisis and future options for the different progressive forces in the Arab world. Yes, and I thank you so much for joining this, and hopefully if you're interested in a webinar where Rabab joined as well, together with Omar Dahi, Adam Henier, as well as Rima Majid, please go to VIDC's website. There you can find further information, vidc.org. Thank you really so much for joining, and all the best. Take care. Bye.